We are going to wait just a few seconds for all the assistants to connect. Yes, I think that everyone joined. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or good night, depending on where you are connecting from. Welcome to today's alumni session entitled Design Great Value Proposition. Thank you very much, Robin, to be with us today. I am Paola, Alumni Manager at ZIGURAT, and I'm really happy to meet you all and really happy that you're joining. I would like to give you some context first and to say that these sessions are exclusive to our alumni community to connect with other professionals and companies from all around the world and boost your skills. That's why I'm happy to welcome Robin, who is a globally recognized educator, advisor, and investor, focusing on the implication of exponential technologies such as blockchain, quantum and artificial intelligence on organizational structures, business, and society. Robin holds several advisory board mandates for organization in the educational and tech industry, including ZIGURAT. Today, we will delve into the art and science of crafting compelling value proposition that resonate deeply with customers. We emphasize the crucial distinction between a product and its value proposition, underscoring that the latter is the unique promise of value to be delivered. I'm very sorry, I'm today with my son. Zitto un attimo. But okay, I will welcome Robin. Thank you very much. And I will give you the floor. Thank you, Robin. I would like to tell you all to take advantage of Robin availability to make questions. And please, Robin.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening from Germany, whatever the time zone is you're in. Paola mentioned that already. Always happy to have also some people joining sessions over breakfast. That's the fun part of a global program like they are run at ZIGURAT. Very happy to be here. I'm not sure. I think some names I've seen before. So welcome back if we have spent the classroom together before. And I'm very happy that we can spend the next hour or so together to discover a little bit what value propositions are. So maybe some of you have been also in the previous sessions where we're looking at discovery of ideas and how to develop actually from an entrepreneurial perspective into something meaningful. And if you have had a class with me in the past, normally what I'm always emphasizing is get the value proposition right the first thing basically that you're doing. And also probably you recall that I was saying like, but you will fail with that. The reason for that is that the whole idea of value propositions is quite dynamic. So with the progress we're doing with our ventures, with our companies, the value proposition normally also changes to a certain degree or even completely. And that's the good fun about that. Another thing that we quite often see when we're talking about value propositions is, especially when startups getting more mature or with ideas getting more mature, that the discussion around value propositions fades a little bit into the background or is not existing whatsoever anymore. But please always keep in mind when you're working with value propositions or on your startup, that's always the foundation that you should regularly update, that you should regularly work with, and that you should regularly check back onto it. It's not like we have done this checkbox and never seen again activity, but it's rather an activity that will always keep you to a certain degree busy within your organization. With that being said, I'm going to share my screen real quick so that we are going through the presentation and a little bit more of a structured approach on how to do that. So can you just give me like a thumbs up if you can see my screen, if that is working properly? Fantastic, great. Okay, so let's start with the foundations. What is actually a value proposition? And I'm excusing this slide. It's not winning a design award, but I wanted to make my life here a little bit easy and just put a definition that resonates quite well with my perspective on value propositions and works through it, because I think it really covers already the foundations and gives us a really nice bridge for the topics that we're going to cover right after. And I'm making my life even easier here because I'm going to read it sentence by sentence, and then I'm going to say a couple of additional words to that. So let's start. A value proposition is a simple statement that summarizes why a customer would choose your product or service. It communicates the clearest benefit that customers receive by giving you their business. And what you can probably see from this first two sentences of this definition is probably the word simple statement. And I think that's the most important word, especially in the first sentence, is the understanding what actually your value proposition is. And that's already the first clue why a value proposition is not a product. What we tend to be really good with is to explain products or services from what they are and what we can expect by using them, from a functional perspective, from an emotional perspective whatsoever. But many companies struggle to really portray what the value is. And the value is what is being mentioned here in the second part of the sentence, which is the clearest benefit that customers receive by giving you their business. So we have also transactional idea already being involved in the value proposition. So meaning when we're talking about value propositions, we really want to make sure that we can tell our customers what the value is they get out of the products, which is based on the benefits they're receiving in exchange for a business transaction. Second part of that builds up onto that. Every value proposition should speak to a customer's challenge and make the case for your company as the problem solver. So meaning, whilst the product expresses normally, as I mentioned, functional value, functional characteristics of what you're offering, here we want to address challenges or problem statements our customer encountering and demonstrate how we are a problem solver for that. And the value proposition normally sits between exactly those two, between the problem and the solution, which then normally is the product itself. So in between, there's something else. And if this feels now a little bit cryptic for the moment, stay with me. I'm going to make this more tangible in just a second when we're going into more of what is meant by that. But let's first wrap this part up. And then the last part, and this is then so the ultimate cherry on the top, so to say, a great value proposition may highlight what makes you different from competitors, but it should always focus on how customers define your value. So it's coming from the inside out as well. And it's also about making sure that you're distinguishing yourself from competition. And this will be also the last slide in this presentation at the end of the session, where we're going to look at competition again. And we're going to basically use that definition now piece by piece to go through this presentation. So first part of this presentation is mainly focusing on how do we get like these simple statements, how do we communicate the value, and how do we manage to portray the benefits we are delivering to our customers. Then the second part is all about how we make sure that they are perceiving us also as the problem solver, and then ultimately how we make sure that we have also a distinguishing factor presented in order to give an advantage over competitors. So let's make this all more tangible. First thing, how do we get to a value proposition? And from my side, I would always choose these three tools, and I would always choose them together, and I would always choose them in that order that it is listed here on this slide. The value proposition canvas, the blank formula, and then the HBS questions, HBS standing here for Harvard Business School. And all together, they help us to really portray and work out the nitty-gritty of the value propositions. And the reason why I'm choosing these three is for a simple reason. The value proposition canvas, which we're going to talk about in a second, creates space and opportunities to actually identify potential value propositions. The blank formula makes it really easy to put it into a simple sentence. And then the HBS questions put this into a context in terms of a business transaction. And with these three tools, we're balancing this quite nicely out so that we're not ending up with something super artificial or something super academic or something too easy on the statement itself. So let's look into all these three tools. The first one, value proposition canvas. The value proposition canvas, and again, this slide may look a little bit ugly, but this is the original value proposition canvas, how it looked, or how it has been proposed by the creators. And you see here that the value proposition canvas gives us two exercises. One, and this is the circle part here on the right side, that's where we're looking at the customers. And then in the squared part, that's where we're looking more at the products and services. And in between best case, there's the place where the value proposition is being created between like the product and service and the customer perspective. So this is very much aligned with what we had from the definition on the previous slide. But what I really want to highlight here is, because that's normally the first question people have, like, oh, how do we going to work with that? How do we come to like this part in the middle where the two arrows are intersecting? How do I bring a value proposition from that? And this is exactly the difficult part. But what I want to highlight here is when you're going to choose to work with the value proposition canvas, approach it more not from the goal perspective of getting out the value proposition, but more as an exercise to create the space that will ultimately enable you to identify the right opportunities for the right value propositions. Because what this value proposition canvas does really, really well is it puts us into a couple of exercises. And when we're starting here at the customer side, the really, really important part that is quite often being overlooked when we're designing value propositions and then ultimately also the solutions and the products out of that is the understanding for the customer jobs to be done. So whenever you have a customer, they have a job to be done. Otherwise, they're not caring about what you're doing whatsoever. So having this clear of saying like, what is the results the customer achieves in order for them to say like, this was a successful endeavor, is the first important part that you need to look at. So for example, to make this very simple, if the problem statement, let's come up with a simple problem statement, is to eat dinner every night at home, then the ultimate customer job to be done is that they actually eat. So if you're now creating this fancy cooking utensil and whatever, and people are using that, but they are not going to eat afterwards because they're not managing to get a dinner out of that, then this is a fail. So we need to really be clear about what does the customer want to achieve? What is the job that they need to get done? The same if you think about something, let's go with simple examples like commuting. It doesn't matter if you're creating the best commuting device if the person is not arriving at their office on time, for example. So this is like the minimum requirement. And we see often that great products that could actually deliver onto that struggle because they're not capable of actually delivering this customer job to be done with 100% precision and with 100% accuracy on that, because like customers probably then just like get 80% there, or they are like, if you think about like these bike sharing schemes that we had in many cities for many times, where many of them also failed, is if the customer job to be done here is to use an alternative mobility offering is within the city, and probably I'm coming from a value proposition, so like I want to go meeting to meeting in the city center. So probably my customer job is to get to a destination on time and not sweating at the same time. So if you put the cheapest bikes that will force me to pedal a lot and me ending up being totally sweaty at my next meeting, then you probably delivered half of it. Yes, I'm there on time, but I'm sweaty as hell and I can't do a professional meeting anymore. So probably just like fixing that then with a better product would have been the solution to that. And like really understanding the customer job to be done is critical, because if we do that, we can understand what are the customer gains and pains that we need to address. Gains, what do they want to gain from the current alternatives, how they're solving the problem, and what are the pains that are either being currently created or also in the other way that a new offering may create for them. Because, and we're going to talk about this as well, it's really important to understand there's no solution out there that not at least creates a little bit of harm or a little bit of a downside somewhere. Quite seldomly that we have only positive contributions in the perception of value. And then the same we can do for the product side, right? We can say like, hey, what is creating the gains? What is relieving the pains? How can we design the product and service around that? And then in the middle, we come up with something. And this is the cool part, because it forces us to think holistically about that. And just to make this even more tangible in terms of what I mean with creating like this opportunity space, let's take the example of a bicycle. So if you put like the product here into the left box of a bicycle, that can create a ton of different value propositions depending on how you're setting up the customer jobs to be done and the persona profile itself. So imagine your value proposition that you're ending up with is, I'm offering you a cheaper way to go from A to B compared to, I don't know, public transport or the car. Then you're probably going to design your product from a functional characteristics in a way that it serves a comfortable ride into the city center. If your value proposition that you're going to end up with is to have a product or have a value proposition that is more aiming at a healthy lifestyle, for example, you may probably want to create your bicycle in a more sportive way. Or if you are going to create a bike with the value proposition of that is your new luxurious car, then you're probably designing your bike in like a super premium fashion, while compared to if it's like, hey, I'm offering a mobility solution for a poor student, then you're probably going with a cheap bicycle. And the product bicycle itself remained relatively the same, apart from smaller modification from the engineering perspective, but the value proposition and hence the customers you're addressing completely changed on that side. So creating this opportunity space based on what we have really helps them to nail down the value proposition with the second tool, which is the blank formula. And the blank formula is as simple as that. There's not much to say, because the blank formula basically asks you to do three things. Just like, whom do you help, to do what, and what are you doing in order to do so, to make them do so. It's very simple. And the very cool part about the blank formula, why I'm such a big fan of that, is it really helps you to focus based on the space that you've created before with the canvas. And then at the same time, it also empowers you to have a fantastic elevator pitch for what you're actually doing. A lot of startups are struggling with their elevator pitches because they are so obsessed with their product, which is understandable because the products are normally great and that's where the most effort goes in. But most of the time, especially when I'm an investor or when I'm a potential customer, I don't care that much about the product in the first place. That's the second part, as soon as I'm getting interested in what you're doing. But in the beginning, I'm really helpful to just understand what you are doing for me. And this blank formula really helps with that. Because in the first interaction, no matter what the target audience is, be it a customer, be it a potential investor, be it a bank, be it a business partner, be it a future employee, the first thing you want to achieve is always to make sure these people are actually interested in that, or have at least a foundation to decide if it's worth continuing with that. So if you can manage within like 30 seconds, or like even less, probably 5 seconds or 10 seconds, because the blank formula will enable you to do so, what you are actually empowering the person you're talking with is two things. On the one hand side, they can judge if what you're doing is actually relevant for them, because maybe it's not relevant, and I can say like, hey, well, that sounds super interesting, but not for me, because probably I'm happening not to be active in the e-mobility, whatever kind of industry. So I can give you immediate feedback. And at the same time, if it's relevant for me, I can ask a very important question, which is, oh, that's super cool. I'm interested. Tell me more. And this is really the intro then into more. Then we can start explaining all the features of our products, all the cool use cases, and so on and so forth. But I'm making sure that people are understanding the value first, and then from there, communicating that they're interested in inviting you to actually tell more is much more powerful than talking 10 minutes to people that are bored, that are just friendly, because they are not going to say you, hey, this is totally irrelevant. Can you please move on? This is really something that that is helpful on that end. And then from there, in the last step, we can go into the HBS questions, which I don't want to spend too much time on either, because most of the stuff is already answered from before. And this is exactly what customers and which needs, but it adds the business layer now as the next question. And this is what is the relative price of that. And the relative price is an interesting topic to consider, because what we quite often are really good with describing is a monetary transaction for a product or service. So meaning I give you a product and you give me money. But there's more to that from what the actual price of a product is. And that's something that we really need to be aware of. Because, and this is where you probably need to ask yourself this question: what is actually the problem with value propositions? That sounds all super easy. And yes, it's most of the time it's easy to start with that. But then there comes this problem layer of, on the one hand side, relative price, and then on the other side, perceived value. And one number that is in our way is this one here. And this is 900%. And for the moment, please ignore everything that this 900% means. You just need to know that this is a huge number. If you happen to be really interested in this topic, you can head over to the work of John Gervil, which was published in 2003 at Harvard Business School. Was a paper on why consumers don't buy, the psychology of new product adoption. And what he basically describes in this paper is, in order for people to adapt a solution to their existing problem, they need to perceive it as 900% better as the current alternative they're having. So how do you calculate this? Ignore this for the moment, because that we could fill another 10 lectures with. But you really need to understand, in order for people to make a switch to your product or service, you need to be much, 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 much better. Much, 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 much better. And this is something that we see also very often happening, that companies are like, oh, but yeah, my product is so much better than the one that they're currently using. This is most of the time true, but it's probably not at the 900% threshold. It's probably 100% or 200 or 250, but it's not enough in order to make the switch. And the more something is embedded into an ecosystem, the harder it gets to move out of that. Look into the products Microsoft is putting out for office use cases. Like every product that you can think of that Microsoft has, you find at least one alternative that is significantly better. But the pain in order to get there is way too high. So the costs that are associated with the switch lower the value proposition of the actual product or service. And this is what we call perceived value. And perceived value is this. It's the user perceived benefits, the ones that we have already talked about also in the definition, minus the user perceived cost, which then leads to user perceived value. And describing all these benefits, most of the time, we are very, very good with that because we deal with our stuff. We have done our homework on value propositions. When it comes to user perceived costs, we are most of the time not that good, because many organizations stop their costs by exactly what the word implies, and this is dollar terms, euro terms, or just the monetary costs of a product, to keep this in a very simple sentence. But every product or service comes with additional user cost, and they can be highly individual depending on the user, but they are coming from the way the product is being presented. Best example for that, to make this also tangible and easy to understand, is if you think about a fitness studio or a gym. If you have never been to one, and you are now deciding, coming from this value proposition of the gym, you're getting in shape, you're living a healthier lifestyle, you will be more energized, whatever. It's like, yeah, I see this benefit, I want to have that. So you finally found the motivation to sign up, and you went there, and everything's good. So now the cost part comes in, user perceived cost. So you had like your training there, you now decided to go for it, then you get a contract. So this is the easy part. Then it's just like, okay, you need to pay 50 euros, $50, whatever, a month as a subscription plus whatever. So you have like the dollar terms, and then you figure out, oh damn, I have never been to the gym, so I need to buy shoes now. I need to buy sports gear, like trousers and shirts, and I need to buy a water bottle, whatever. So you can sum this up as like one-time costs. And then you figure out, oh, okay, I need to go there every day. So instead of having 2 hours of Netflix every night, I have now only 1 hour of Netflix every night. So that's a cost. It's a cost to say like, oh, I change, or I trade 1 hour of Netflix for 1 hour at the gym. Then you have also even softer things where say, okay, you maybe now go to the gym, you're super motivated, you have your new outfit on, you're feeling great, you're going in there, rush hour, every equipment piece in the studio is being used right now, and everybody knows exactly what they're doing. Everybody looks the part, and you're coming in there and you're feeling like, oof. First of all, I have no idea how to use these devices. Secondly, I probably will embarrass myself. Thirdly, I'm looking not as fit as everybody else here. So all of a sudden, you have psychological costs involved. So maybe the first time you're overcoming them, but maybe the next time you say, oh, maybe I shouldn't go into rush hours time, so I should go when nobody is there. But then you figure out at this time of the day, you can't really go there. So this becomes also a cost. So the cost of pushing yourself through this embarrassment of a fitness studio or gym where everybody is looking at you. At least that's how you perceive it. Nobody's actually looking, but you are thinking about that. And these costs are all adding up, and probably all of a sudden, even though monetarily speaking, the costs are super aligned with what you're expecting, because of all this secondary layers of costs around that, the value proposition or the benefits become negative. So you have all the benefits, you're so great, you put all the costs next to it, and I say, oh, the value is actually minus, or it's negative value for me. And this is something that we need to be aware of, that we need to play with, that we need to manage. And that's why I initially said the work with value propositions is not something that you're only doing early stage, even though all the entrepreneurial methodologies and tools imply or suggest that this is the first exercise, and then it never comes back in the whole process. But it's actually something that you need to really work on. The more you grow your venture, the more important value propositions become, because exactly all of this is where your strategic opportunity is. Think about this gym example. If you are identifying that you're losing business because people feel not psychologically safe in your gym, because this is creating too much cost for the benefits you're providing, maybe you can have a dedicated offering for that. Maybe you can have like newbie classes or like newbie hours or whatever, or you can have like sessions where people are getting more together. Maybe you can create a community. Maybe you can team up people with Facebook. There's like a lot of opportunities that perceived costs can unfold and can give us really a competitive advantage to find our position in the market. And best case, come to this 900%, because it's not the 900% from the value proposition that we define. It's 900% from the value proposition that we defined minus the perceived cost. So it might be that we even need to be much, much better than the 900% because the costs are in there. So this is something really to keep in mind. And along this perceived value propositions, we have a couple of things that are working against it. And I just want to keep this very short because I don't want to do this psychology masterclass now. But we really need to keep in mind that when we're working with customers, they are having three major challenges in order to deal with the perception of a value proposition. And this is on the one hand side, the habits. So everybody runs to a certain degree on autopilot, day in, day out. So it might be that your daily behaviors, your daily autopilots make it really hard for you to stick to a new value proposition offering, like going to the gym. The second part that we're falling for is the cognitive load and the cognitive biases. So this means, on the one hand side, everybody learns differently. So depending on how complex a product or service is, it might be just too much for us. So this typical thing with a lot of apps you can give to younger people, and they naturally figure out how everything works, compared to an older generation that probably needs some more training in order to get all the benefits out of a digital offering like an application. And then the biases is how we're looking at the world, and there's a ton of biases, how we are misleading into certain directions. And then ultimately the mental models, how we are navigating through this world. We really need to be aware of that when we are working with customers and when we want them to change and to adapt, because a new product adoption is always also to a certain degree change. We also need to consider psychological aspects, and we also need to address them. It's not just like having the greatest product, having the greatest value proposition, communicating everything clear, but it's also working with the customer and helping them to actually get benefits out of what you're actually offering. And this is probably the easiest summary of what customer centricity actually is: to make sure that your customers are understanding, on the one hand side, the value proposition, and then are capable and empowered to get the rewards out of this value proposition for themselves by helping them to adapt and change. And then from that, we can work with customer force, and this is directly aligned with what we have been talking before. Because if we think about a customer in the value proposition, there's some kind of like a desired outcome that we want to look at. And if I like this picture here, this visual of climbing the mountain, there's like the customer forces canvas, by the way, as well, if you want to look this up after this class, that helps you with like all these different kind of fields. But the way we can look at this is, the moment a customer decides that they are going to start their journey up to the mountain, to the desired mountain, so they are triggered by something. This could be a marketing campaign, could be whatever. So they are getting aware, they are getting interested, and then they see that, and this is the first part, this understanding of the value proposition, and see like, okay, there's something that's behind here, and it could lead to a desired outcome that I have. And then we have forces that are holding the customer back. This is at the bottom of the slide, where we have the habits again, and things like anxiety, that creates friction and inertia. So this anxiety comes from, like, could be like this psychological safety that we have been talking about. There's like certain things that are holding people back that might help people, or that might have the impact on our customer to stick with what they have been doing before. One great example of that is the default effect, is the cognitive bias. And the default effect says, if someone doesn't know what to do or how to behave, they will fall to the default behavior of what they have done before. That means if we don't explain it properly enough on how to get the benefits, for example, out of the value proposition, then probably people will never adopt, because their default effect will hold them back. So this is like the inertia layer. And then we have the positive forces, which are push and pull forces. So what we try to do is like push first the people up by creating either a desire or addressing the pain or highlighting the problem. And then once the customer moves, so to say, we try to pull them up with attraction. So this could be everything like giving them rewards, giving them more benefits, unlocking something, right? So however we can help them move up the mountains. The important thing here that I want to highlight, because it will be always highly individual, is that you can work with the customer along that. And this is a very different approach to customer journey mapping, because when we're doing customer journey mapping, most of the time we're really technical with that. But what I would highly recommend here is also to bring in this value proposition, the psychological layer on value prop on customer journeys, to really make sure where's the inertia and the friction holding them back, and where can we create push and pull effects in order for them to progress and get the benefits out of what we're offering. And this also then translates into value over time. This is another aspect why it's so important also to stick with your value proposition design, not only for like a one-time activity when you're a startup or an early stage, but throughout the whole life cycle of your venture. Because what normally happens is when people start to adopt a new product or service, the way they are perceiving the value is either lower or higher. Most of the time it's not in the real value where they are. So this is like this typical things when we're looking at higher perceived value. This is where people are excited, where they think like, oh, this is so great, I finally did it. This is a typical example that happens to a lot of fitness studios and gyms. Like 1st of January, everybody is hyped, everybody is excited. So, and they see now, because of so many different forces, they see like, oh, this is now going to my life-changing event. So they have like this super high perceived value. And then what happens normally is after a while they never come back, because they have not adopted the new habit on the one hand side, but then also at the same time probably they haven't seen the benefits being translated, and the value proposition for the perceived value becomes negative. You have the same thing also on the lower perceived value. This is where people are convinced but not really, and they say like, yeah, let's give it a try and see how it's unfolding. So the whole idea is, and this is sometimes a little bit counterintuitive, because people tend to say like, oh, we want to make always sure that people are on this higher perceived value. This is not the case. We always want to make sure we bring them into this real value line, because if they are hyped for too long, every interruption onto this hyped phase will lead to absolute frustration. So normally they crash through the value proposition, and then it's really, really hard to bring them back into the right perception. The same is with the low perceived value. So if the people are getting from there too hyped, then they might crash also as well. We always want to make sure that people are perceiving it more or less the right way it is. And you probably now ask the question, Robin, how the hell should I know if they are perceiving it the real value? Well, very difficult. Let's be realistic. The better approach here is to have this awareness of that when you see, oh, there's a lot of customers that seem to be super hyped, make sure that you're either delivering onto that or that you are bringing them into the right value layer. Same from the other side. It's more having this awareness. It's not that you can manage this with like hard KPIs and say like, it's this, then that. It's more the work and the interest. And this is my number one recommendation. Be really interested in your customers. Don't outsource being interested in the people that are paying money for your service and that are grateful for the value proposition that you're delivering. If you're interested in your customers, customer centricity is nothing that we need to discuss, because then you're by default doing the right thing. Be interested in your customers and have these modules in the back of your head, because you might see and like probably talk with a customer and they're like super hyped. You first say, okay, yeah, but right, I would love if you get all these results, but be more realistic with that. So you probably can counter this already, or someone that's not so say, hey, yeah, I can demonstrate this to you and it can help you, so that they're really then convinced. So keep this as a tool for you to work with people strategically. You will never make like hot maps or something like that where you can exactly say like, oh, this customer is 0.5% on lower perceived value, something like that. This is probably a little bit too technical, like oversimplified. So last chapter for today, user and buyer, a love story. This is something we tend to forget as well, because we're obsessed with the word persona and customer in the discussion when we're talking about the customer. But there's different kind of customers. Mainly the user and the buyer is the most important one to distinguish. And they're exactly what it is. A user uses and the buyer buys. Nothing too complicated behind there, but there's different kind of setups when it comes to products and services. So when we're selling products or services, normally one of those four applies. At least I don't know what another scenario could be. The easiest one is the bottom right corner, where the user and the buyer is the same. So someone buys something to use it by themselves. Very simple. The other really simple part is if there's no similarity. So there's someone that buys it and there's someone that uses it. This is typical for B2B sales. You have corporate procurement, they are doing all the buying, and then like the teams are using that. Kids' toys are also a great example for that. Parents buy it, children use it most of the time. And then you have like this hybrids in between where they're almost the same or some similarities, where kids' toys are a great example as well. So if you think about Lego, there's a lot of adults, mainly fathers, that buy their kids all this cool Lego stuff just to play with it by themselves. So that's where you have some similarity or almost the same, depending on the Lego passion of the father. For us, the really important part is when we're designing value proposition is to be aware of that. Because depending on which scenario we have, and we're mainly focusing now on no similarity and the same, the other ones are hybrid and they're basically the same as no similarity. But we need to be aware of what that means from the process. So if the user is the buyer, we have this process in front of us. It's an awareness phase, it's a consideration phase, and it's a decision phase. So during the awareness phase, this is the typical like marketing campaign or PR or whatever. So like the first touch point. So people are getting in touch with what you're offering. And normally this is the part where they are attracted by the value proposition that you're offering. Then in the second part, in the consideration stage, they are starting to understand the value. It could be like the product test, for example. And this understanding of the value comes through the product. Very important. They need to interact with the product or the service in order to understand the value, because that's the way they can validate that this is really the case. Because we can say a lot of value propositions, we can show a lot of product, but it's on the user to match these two together. That's the perceived value. They understand the value by seeing what benefits they get out of this and what costs are implied with that. And then in the decision phase, what basically happens is that the user has actually understood that the product or service you're offering solves their problem, that you have a net positive value proposition based on a problem. Very simple. So first, explain and communicate the value proposition, then make them understand that it's actually creating this value through the product or service, and then ultimately make sure that they understand that it actually solves what they want to do. Easy peasy. When there is a difference between the user and the buyer, then the journey looks exactly the same, but has a couple of differences. So first of all, what you want to make sure is you want to make sure that you empower the user to convince the buyer and create a buyer value proposition. So what does that mean? You basically need to go 2 times through the cycle. Sometimes it works in parallel, but first of all, we need to have this. So the user needs to be aware, needs to understand the value, and needs to make the decision that this is a good thing. And for the parents that have children, normally a TV ad is enough for that from the newest toys in order to have the decision that this is the right thing for in this case, the child to have. But then again, you go through this awareness, consideration, and decision phase with a different kind of story, right? So the first touch point for the buyer could be that they are told by the user that they get like a memo or whatever in a business context. Then in the consideration phase, what the buyer needs to understand is that there is value for buyer and the user. So even though the buyer may not be the one that is going to use the value proposition or is receiving the value proposition in the end, they still need to understand that the product is actually creating this value proposition. Because that's the alignment. Because if they don't understand, they will always be in some way in ambiguity of the product, and that's not good. Because we need, for the last part of the decision, the understanding for the user, and ultimately then the buyer needs to have the understanding that the product actually solves a problem for the user, and more importantly, that it is not a risk for the buyer. So same here, the user identifies that this is a product that they want. They are creating the awareness for the buyer. The buyer understands the value as well. So they understand, yes, this product is actually creating this value from a user perspective. And then they decide that when this is the case, that they have a positive value contribution to the user, but also not getting into the risk of the decision. You don't want to have risk as a buyer, because you might be the one to blame. People are like, oh, why did you buy this? Like for the parent story. So father comes home with the big Lego set and mother says like, why have you bought that? It's like waste of money. So we need to have this risk mitigation for the buyer as well. And that's where we need one more thing. And this is the unique selling proposition. The unique selling proposition is nothing else than in some way the value proposition for the buyer. And normally it comes from what you do really well and what people actually want. And what people actually want in this case comes from the user. And what you do well is what you normally do from a value proposition perspective. And then at the same time, what you want to make sure is that you have something that distinguishes you from the competition. And we talked about this also in the definition part. So you want to make sure that the value proposition also translates into unique selling proposition in order for the buyer then to see where they can be. So the value proposition applies mainly to the user, but we need it also for the buyer to understand the value of the product, and then ultimately also to distinguish it from competitive offerings in the market. Because what you do well, you have already defined, and what people want is coming from the user. And hence, as a last takeaway, when we're working with value propositions, this is how we address the user, but we also need to address the buyer with a selling proposition. And in case user and buyer is the same, you're doing the same thing here, just that the value proposition and the selling proposition is addressing the same person instead of two or multiple parties. And with that, I'm coming to an end. That's the reason why I think value propositions is very important. As an additional last takeaway, and if you want to discuss later on, feel free to connect. But the real important part that you should take away from this overall presentation is really work with your value proposition and continue working with that on a regular basis, and see it as an opportunity to find strategic clarity for your product or service, for your roadmap, for the way you work with users, to find additional insights around your users, and then ultimately use it also to scale and grow. Thank you very much, and I hope this was insightful, and happy to take
Thank you
questions.
very much, Robin. Yeah, we have already some questions here from Omar. Omar is also an ambassador of ZIGURAT. But first of all, I would like also to say or to recall you that in the alumni platform, you have the first part of this session, which is entrepreneurship. And this is kind of second part. I mean, I think it's interesting, if you haven't seen it yet, to go on the alumni platform and watch it. So thank you very much, Omar, for asking. He is saying, thank you, Robin, for sharing this interesting and practical topic. I have noted below a few questions that came to my mind for your help. So let's start from the first one. Referring to the Canvas customer side, what is meant by customer? A category or a type, for example, industry, personas, or it is supposed to be a tailored for a specific single or individual customer?
Yeah.
I don't know. you go on.
Yeah. Depends a little bit on where you are in terms of like stage of your venture development. So the original idea is when we're working with like early stage discovery processes is normally that we pretend that there's like this one standalone persona, this one person that we're designing this for, just to simplify things. But later down the road, as you rightly say in the question, it could be also whole industries, it could be complete persona groups, whatever that is. I wouldn't be too technical with these questions in terms of like what can be what, but rather work with the tools in a way that they are most useful for you. So if you're saying like your customer is a whole industry, so shall it be? Then just pretend to say like what's the problem of the industry, so make it really big scale. Or if you say like, hey, I want to build something, I'm addressing CEOs of companies in the fishing industry, then you probably want to find a CEO in the fishing industry and use their profile in order to portray that. So it can be really, really flexible. I think like there's a lot of rules to all these tools, but you're really using the tools properly if you break all the rules. That's the best advice I can give you on that end, because it also shows you that you're what you're doing and identify what's valuable.
Thank you, Robin. Let's go with the second one. Referring to the VP Canvas business side, the products and services, in contrast with the projects, are continuous by nature. So should value proposition be continuously refreshed to remain competitive? Great question.
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes. Unless it's only functional characteristic. It's my advice would be always just check back. So if you're looking into a lot of products, they have like this typical improvement life cycle where it's more attribute based. Like a second iteration is now the product looks nicer. Third iteration, now the product is faster. Fourth iteration, now the product is lighter, whatever the characteristics are. So if it's functional engineering perspectives, or the best way to look at it is like the attributes of a product, if it's just the advancements of attributes of a product, then it doesn't necessarily need to be to check back onto your value proposition unless they have an impact onto that. So for example, if let's stick with the bike. Bike's always great for all these examples. Your product is an electric bike, and your value proposition is to offer a near shore, cheap solution to commute from A to B in a range of 30 kilometers. And now through your product development, you have had a breakthrough in pedaling techniques, and with the same effort, so to say, now the bike can go double the speed because like you have like some mechanic magic done, and all of a sudden you could say like, okay, now people could technically go double the size of or like double the amount of kilometers with the bike, and probably this opens then a new target group for you, because maybe in the beginning you had like people that are living in closed city suburbs, and now all of a sudden you say, okay, we can also have like the second layer of suburbs where's the potential market. So it might be that you're going back to that because it has also then the implications on who are your customers. The best advice here always is just check back regularly if your value proposition makes sense. It also helps you to strategically align, because often what we see, this is a chapter that I took out for this presentation, when we have product development is, and Omar, this is directly looking into your question, normally what we have through everything you're adding to your product, and I'm oversimplifying that. So what normally happens is that, or the intent of upgrading a product is actually to create or make it better, make it more valuable, make it perceived more aligned with the value proposition. So everything you're adding contributes positively to the value proposition. Like it would go up all the time. But normally what happens is that the value contribution of each and every update is getting less and less. That's even the best case. In some product categories, adding features or making or improving features actually lead to less or lower perceived value. Why? Because probably you're working against your initial value proposition. Think about a to-do list. If you're starting a business and I'm doing the most simple to-do list, which is just basically write something down, and when it's done, you check it off. Now you're adding like dates, due dates, recurring events, stuff. So they get more and more complex. So even though you're making your product better by adding features, probably each of those features is creating a lesser perceived value proposition, because the one that actually signed up initially wanted to not have these features at all, because they wanted to just like have it very simple. So it might be that through the evolution of your product, the value proposition needs to change and you're ending up in a complete different market compared to where you started. That's the evolution behind it. So regularly checking back makes sense, and making sure that you're strategically aligned is very healthy.
Thank you, Robin. Let's go with the third one, referring to the perceived value from VP. Should value proposition be tangible, for example, service features delivered to customer? If not, what can be the other forms of or promises to customer as value proposition?
Depends highly on what you're doing, to be honest. So the blank formula is a great way to visualize this in a very simple way. It could be the typical things that you're explaining, what each and every feature contributes positively to the people. Normally what happens, and this is what I was looking at in the last part when we were looking at the decision, or like the buying decision ultimately, is the product normally should be the best source of understanding the value proposition the moment people are interested, because from there you can normally explain that. This doesn't need to mean that you need like hours of demos and that everything needs to be tried, but it's good if people can understand the value from your product. It might be that you need to explain it initially and say like, okay, based on your problem, this is how it works, or we're doing this in order to help you do that, to stick with blank. This is normally the best way. And like, I would always follow this pattern. Simple communication, making people understand the core of what you're doing so that they are getting interested, and then opening up the discovery phase for themselves to explore the value by using the product or service.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Omar, for the questions, and Robin. Anyone has any other question or curiosity or doubt? Victor and Trevor are thanking you for the presentation.
Yeah.
I also think it was really interesting and with many insights. You will find the recording on the Alumni platform, and if any of you speak in Portuguese, next week we are gonna have an alumni soft skills session in Portuguese with Paula Lunardelli. And you can find all the information in the platform. But if you don't have any other questions, I would close the session. And again, thank you very much, all of you. Thank you very much, Robin, for your availability and sharing the insights and the presentation. And I hope to see you on the next virtual session. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye. See you next time.
Goodbye. Thank you so much,
Goodbye.
everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.